Hey. Hello, and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. I am joined tonight, as always, by my co-host, Brian Sanders. How you doing, Brian?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. If you're new here, Brian is a retired homicide lieutenant, so obviously in a true crime podcast, his expertise lends a ton. So we're back. We're back. We were gone for two whole weeks. We were down with the vid, guys. We had COVID, and we weren't really sure that that's what happened. Don't even test for it anymore because there's no point when you just treat it symptomatically and you treat it like the flu or a cold. But came home from work. It actually started just before a Tuesday, but that was us missing the first Tuesday 2 weeks ago, because by that night the waves of fatigue were kicking in and the congestion was such that just be thankful we didn't even attempt it. And then I thought for sure by last week, we were about 7 to 9 days in at that point. I thought surely, but last Tuesday came, I had a case prepared for you guys, and the congestion was still horrific. And by then I realized I couldn't taste anything I ate. So that's how we knew that was the test for us for the COVID. But we are well on the mend now. But I will say this time it took a couple it was about 2 solid weeks, I think.
I was done. That was that Tuesday I recorded one, remember? And just
I don't know how you did that. Yeah. I legitimately and I'm
it was bad.
Clearing my voice now, and so it's not lost on me that people love to. The one thing people love to comment on the most, I think, is whether or not I should drink more water or less water or clear my throat.
You can't win.
Or have a good cough. So I'm good with it either way. Hey, Davey. And guys, if you're new here, this is a live YouTube show that airs every Tuesday night, sometime between sunrise and sunset, or maybe before the next sunrise. And so we try to dial it in sometime between 8 and 9 Eastern, usually, though. And we are usually every Tuesday night come podcast season, and just minus the illness, evidently, that was abounding this week. And so we will engage sometimes in the chats. You're welcome to join the chats. It costs nothing. So you just log into YouTube. You just use an email, the same one you were given at birth, and you use a password and you get into the chat. So we always like to see new faces and see everyone. And so we try to kind of get right to the show. We often cover unsolved or unresolved, and tonight is no exception. And then at the end of the show, we engage with the chats and usually have some fun banter back and forth. Actually, in saying that, I will say quickly, we've got a friend in the chats named Bosco, and I did see your message, Bosco. He reached out yesterday. We chatted a little bit, and the three of us, and he's got an interesting case. Someone he spoke to has an interesting case close to home, and so we discussed looking into that. So I have not reached out to her yet, Bosco. Today was slammed at work and podcast cramming, but tomorrow will be a good day for that. So I'll let you know as soon as I do. Hey, Liam. Hey, Davey. What's going on, man? Everybody just hop on in and we're going to get settled. Do you have anything you want to cover before we get started?
No, I don't. All of a sudden, I've got the urge to cough, so I'm going to try not to.
Gosh, I'm just like,
I don't know why. I don't know if it's from sitting up here or what.
Yeah. Studio's a little warmer.
I'm good, though.
Okay. Well, as we like to say on Tuesdays, lefties unite, because my hand is always covered in ink. If you are left-hand dominant, you feel the pain. Bosco says you never called him back. Jerk.
I apologize today. I got a lot of stuff done today, but part of it was power washing, so I was covered.
We heard the brand new owners of a brand new power washer.
Yeah. So I'm so sorry, dude.
Liam said, bring on the sneeze. I told him he's not allowed to sneeze unless we get a proper sponsor like Claritin. So he must stifle it. All right, guys.
I do have something.
What is it?
Police Posts apps. No, Police Posts app.
Okay.
It's on they can download it on their phone.
Tell them briefly what that is.
It's based off, or it's off of the Instagram account, Police Posts. They'll post police videos. They've got training background. I've done some training with them in the sense of one of my courses is on their website. And next Tuesday, doing one with them. It's basically like a live on the app, almost like this type of format, cameras, and you can interact, but we'll be going over developing street informants, street information, that sort of thing.
Super interesting. And so I'm sorry if you didn't already clarify, or if you did, that is just for sworn, right? Mm-hmm. That's just for law enforcement, that particular piece. Okay. And then he does training elsewhere that is for civilians as well. So we'll definitely talk about that again at the end of the show. But we're going to dive on in. I should have asked you to do pop culture tonight, because this is right up your alley.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah. I forgot about it. But this case takes place, actually, it's 1987. Oh, okay. You can go for it if you want to scribble some thoughts. Okay. Yeah. In some of our episodes, we like to do a little pop culture or notorious crimes or things like that took place in the year that our case took place in. And lately, we've been doing years that are a little bit more nondescript, like early 2000s and such. But 87 is ripe with all of the pop culture for sure. I know. Go for it. All right, I'm going to get started, though, here. This case is interesting, guys. I'll be interested to hear from you and hear if you know of this case or have heard about it. You may have recently, because a documentary called Burden of Proof was dropped to HBO Max back in 2023. Prior to that, though, and I mean, even since, really, there's not a whole lot out there. Like in the sense of, like, I will browse a Wikipedia page when we're researching for a show. That's not usually where I get the brunt of my information. But like this, and there's almost always a Wikipedia page for everything. There's not one for this case, for instance. Like just things like that. It's not as easy to find information about the victim and about the rest of the family. And I would say only more so since the documentary has aired, to shine a little bit of light on it. But let's get started. This is the case of Jennifer Pandos. So Jennifer was born on May 15th of 1971 in Charlottesville, Virginia. Her parents were Ron and Margie Pandos, and she had a brother named Stephen. And together they all lived in this really nice community in the suburbs there. And this was a gated community. So, we're going to come back to that. What do we like to say? Put that in a little box and take it away somewhere to unpack a little bit later. We are proponents of compartmentalization on this show, evidently, because I encourage it every week. Jennifer had a close friend group. She was involved in school activities. She was an avid reader. She really enjoyed art. And so she would participate in like the local and school art shows, these kinds of things. So things at home vary depending on which source you might want to follow. Okay, so her brother Stephen, and you'll hear me reference the documentary often, and that's because that's kind of where the more comprehensive information or data has come from. And I'm going to touch on it now, and then I'll try to refrain until closer to the end. But in the documentary, it's a 4-part series. Okay, it's quick enough to get through. And I hear mixed reviews on people who follow true crime podcasts and documentaries and these kinds of things based on their experience with watching it. I thought it would be a little different than an independent documentary, even though that's who produced it ultimately, because the ship was led by Stephen Pandos, Jennifer's brother. This all was in his search to find answers on his sister's disappearance and to find out exactly what happened. Now, Stephen has a very specific idea of what he thinks happened to Jennifer. And he had this idea for many, many years. And so this documentary crew comes in and essentially helps him navigate this as he's looking into the investigation, kind of spurring more, if there's more collection of evidence or more analysis to be done or more information to be found, interviews to be collected, these kinds of things. So I guess I thought it would be less, you watch one and we know now with documentaries, think of Making of a Murder, think of The Staircase with Michael Peterson. While they're all, I find great to watch, there's always a colored lens there. And I feel like depending on which way the directors or producers of the documentary lie in terms of their opinion on the case, that's often how it's portrayed to you. And so you get kind of a colored version of the story, however they would like to tint it. This one kind of does that. And you certainly go through the first, 2.5 to almost 3 episodes of the 4-part series thinking one thing very strongly. And a lot of circumstantial evidence at least points to that. And it would be Stephen's narrative of what he believes happened. And then some things come out later that might change that a little bit and question it. So it is interesting, but I will say that Stephen is a pretty resounding voice throughout because he is the one who kind of led into reopening the investigation of his sister's disappearance. So Stephen, when speaking about home life, will say he was older than Jennifer by about 3 years. All right. And so he recounts a childhood of some normalcy sprinkled with chaos. So their father, Ron, was a Vietnam vet. So Ron actually deployed when Stephen was a baby and came home when he was like 18 months old, I believe. So Margie, mom, will say that they never had a really close bond because they never bonded because Stephen was 18 months old. That's not necessarily how that has to work. But so those close to him say that he suffered from what we would now diagnose as PTSD, very likely so. We're looking at, I think he was deployed in 68, 69, or 79, 69 and 70. 68, 69, excuse me. But I'm sure he probably did have what we would now diagnose as PTSD. And this would present itself as controlling around the home. Margie will say he had a very, very short fuse. So people corroborate Stephen's account in that sense of what his dad was like when he was growing up. But this led all the way to physical abuse at home. And of course, we don't have the option to ask Jennifer, but Stephen recounts having to walk on eggshells around his dad. He says that, for instance, he was choked, punched, hit with a golf club, things like this throughout the year. So we don't mean just kind of like extensive discipline in the form of a spanking or something else. It continued to get more violent. And so Stephen will say that Jennifer's attitude toward it was to fight back. So I think she was pretty spunky and she didn't want to tolerate a lot from her dad. And he said his way of handling it was to kind of just take his punishment and then be gone as quick as he could. So they kind of handled things a little bit differently in terms of that. And so he said that when these moments happened, his mom, Margie, would remove herself. So when asked about that, like, what did your mom do? Did she intervene? And he's like, no, actually, no. She definitely removed herself. He said they didn't feel that they got any real protection from her. Now, they never felt abused by her. She did not hurt them, but she didn't seem to do anything to prevent Dad from doing that. So as the kids got older and into their later teen years, they didn't really spend a whole lot of time together, which makes sense. When he's 17, she's 14, 18, 15, etc. So they had different friend groups. They had different hobbies. And Stephen said that Jennifer would finally just start being gone on the weekends for most of the weekend. And he thinks that this is because it just really didn't feel safe at home. And so once they kind of had the option to have some independence and get out of the house, they both certainly seemed to utilize this. So current day Margie doesn't dispute that as well. While from the outside, we talk about everything looking good, other people in their neighborhood, this was a really nice neighborhood. It was a noted community within Williamsburg, Virginia. Jennifer was also dealing with some very tumultuous teenage issues. So Jennifer had quite a life going on while she and Stephen weren't necessarily sibling it up over there, kind of hanging out. She wasn't coming to him with her troubles. She was handling a lot of things on her own. So Jennifer had a boyfriend named Tony Tobler. Tony was newer to town, and he will say now that Ron never approved of his relationship with Jennifer. He says that he lived in the trailer park and that Ron and Margie, especially Ron, looked down on this, that they didn't choose him for her. But I think there's also a few other things in play that we're going to discuss later. We also know that at just 15 years old, Jennifer became pregnant with Tony's child. Together, they presented her parents with this information and had already made a plan to go through with an abortion. So she told her parents that that's what they wanted to do. They handled it that way. And Jennifer and Tony eventually break up. Depending on who you listen to, they either break up because their relationship was tumultuous or because her parents made them. I think it was both. Ron will say now, current day Ron, the father will say he didn't want them anywhere near each other. particularly after finding out that information. He didn't want them to see each other or talk to each other. These are his words. So they did break up, and Tony started dating a girl named Corey, and Jennifer could not stand this. So she was wild with jealousy over Corey, and these are teenagers who have, like I said, been through already a whole lot of adult type things that they've had to handle. And so, Tony going off and having this other girlfriend is bothering Jennifer. Now, they're all in high school together. So, we've all been in these kinds of situations. You can kind of see how this is going. So Jennifer's diary entries read as such, but unbeknownst to Corey, Tony was still talking to Jennifer as well. So he kind of had her hanging, on by a little string. So Corey didn't realize that they were back to kind of talking when she wasn't with Tony. And so they definitely had a bit of a drama-filled kind of teenage first love kind of thing. Some of her entries talk about telling Tony she won't allow him to throw her around anymore like a whore. We are going to get into that in more detail a little bit later in the story. But this goes on and on for a while with Tony dating Corey and still somewhat entertaining Jennifer. But Jennifer was not happy at all about this situation. Now, what we do find that was never brought into evidence and was never actually truly looked at, I think we could agree now and tell me otherwise, is that Tony was never looked at as a suspect in Jennifer's disappearance. And being that he was the most current, most recent boyfriend of hers, and they had kind of a tumultuous past and had just not long before this broken up before her disappearance, like really soon before it. I think he was talked to briefly by police, but he was never fully interviewed or considered as such. And in saying that, look at the times. I guess we have text and things now, but what did girls do so much of then? Write all the things. And so she had a diary she wrote an entry almost daily. In fact, her last entry was February 9th, which was the day before she disappeared. So she wrote about her life, about school, about her family, about Tony in this diary. And separately, Mom, Margie, has a shoebox. This is revealed in the documentary when she provides it to Stephen when some investigators are doing some Latin handwriting analysis, which I will say on a side note, the documentary relies heavily on handwriting analysis and polygraphs, which are both things that they're diagnostic. They can be a piece of the puzzle, but I feel like it relies a bit too heavily on it, because to the point that they are excluding suspects based on handwriting. And we all know that one is not a perfect science, right? So I digress. We'll get back to that. But we have all of these, dozens and dozens of notes, we'll say, that Tony and Jennifer had written back and forth. These come out, like I said, during the documentary, meaning this was that dropped in 2023. I think they worked on it for 3 or 4 years. So sometime between 2019 and 23, these were discovered. No one even knew that these existed. And as you will find, Margie tends to just pull things out over the years that it kind of an interesting timing, and maybe it's nothing, maybe I'm reading too much into that, or people do, but these are things often that it seems that an investigator would have wanted to have early on. Yeah,
back then that would have been the diary would have been the cell phone, like you were saying, a smartphone. Or at least if the parents didn't know about it, I would assume investigators would have asked, hey, does she have a diary? Does she have, who are her best friends?
If I'm not mistaken, it was on her bed. It's never been portrayed as oh, and then we found this diary we never knew she had hidden in her dresser or whatever. Yeah. So on the night of February 10th, 1987, Jennifer was in her bedroom talking on her phone. You guys, if you're of a certain age, I guess now it'd be with a cell phone, but you can just see it, right? You can see in 87, it was likely not a cordless phone either. You know what I'm saying? And so I can just see her almost lying on her belly. I guess I'm picturing me as a kid or a teenager, and feet kicked up in the air, laying on your belly, propped up, laughing, talking to your girlfriend on the phone. And so she's talking to one of her childhood friends And excuse me, but she was the only child in the home at this point because Stephen had gone to college the previous fall. So now Stephen's 18. He's a freshman in college. And Jennifer is not yet 16. She wouldn't be 16 until the following May, but we are back in February of 87. So Jennifer's bedroom was on the first floor of their home, and her parents' room was upstairs. So it was a bit of a different setup than normal. Jennifer actually occupied the master bedroom. Some people read into that and say, or almost like blame the parents that she would have this first floor room with a sliding glass door because of access to leave and come and go as she pleases, if she pleased as a teenager. I think a few things are true. It could have been as simple as the dad thought the ventilation was better upstairs and he wanted that room. Or that, it could be a myriad of things that don't necessarily point to guilt or anything weird. And another thing I'll tell you is that if a teenager wants to do something, they will find a way to do it. They don't have to have a sliding glass door in their bedroom to leave. So there's also that. So again, it was the master bedroom that she had downstairs. And inside her room was just pretty much a typical setup. All right. So she had a bed against, let's say, the left wall as you walk in. There was a chest of drawers to the right, and straight ahead as you walked in the bedroom would be that sliding glass door alongside kind of a decking patio out back. So on the evening of February 10th, Jennifer was talking to one of her best friends on the phone, Sharon. Sharon has been interviewed. She's also in the documentary, and her story has remained consistent over the years. Sharon says that as they were talking, Jennifer's dad, Ron, entered the room, and he told Jennifer that it was late and she needed to get off the phone. You need to know that Ron also has not disputed this. He kind of acts like he may not remember it in quite this detail. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but he doesn't dispute the fact that it probably went down just like Sharon says that it did. She says that they were talking when he tells her to get off the phone because it's late. Jennifer kind of ignored him, but then Ron raised his voice in a way that Sharon said she had never heard before. Now, when Stephen hears Sharon's account of that night, he said, oh yeah, you can see him almost feeling it. He's saying I can hear it right now. That's essentially, that was the language, that was the tone, the volume of my home. He was used to his dad talking that way. So Sharon says that Ron raises his voice to quite a loud pitch or volume and shouts for Jennifer to either get the hell off the phone or get off the effing phone. Or she says there was some profanity and he screamed it at her. And he was pissed. And she said it happened quickly. And there was just no doubt about that being the situation. And so at that time, I guess Jennifer yells back something along the lines of, "Fine, Ronald." And so she calls her dad by his name. And then she either hangs up or the phone just goes silent. But either way, they are no longer on this phone call. So, we can look at this a few different ways, and we're going to explore what this could mean a little bit later after I give you a bigger piece of the story. But, it could be as simple as a teenager being a teenager, fine, Ronald, and whatever, and it's over. And he says, you talk to me like that again, you don't get to go to whatever tomorrow after school. Or a lot of people consider this to be basically this is what spurred whatever events ensued that ultimately are what caused her to be gone. So we'll dive into that for sure. So this is the last person that we know of to talk to Jennifer outside of the home would be her friend Sharon that was on the phone with her. So the next morning at 6 a.m., now all we have, remember, Stephen is off at college. Jennifer is silenced. We no longer hear anything else from Jennifer. Okay. So all we have now is anything that Margie and Ron have to tell us. And so there's going to be reasons that this case is going to make you think of JonBenét. And there's going to be reasons that this case makes you think of Michael Peterson's The Staircase. And so we just have Margie and Ron. So take that for what you will. But the next morning at 6 a.m., Margie says that she yells for Jennifer to wake up. There was no answer. She goes to Jennifer's door. She knocks. No answer. She jiggles the doorknob. It's locked. She said it was not like Jennifer to have the door locked, much less all night, and particularly, of course, if she's not answering her as well. So Margie says she calls for Ron, and when there was still no answer when Ron yelled in the room, Ron busted into the room himself. So he was able to bust through the lock And when they open the door, they find what they say was her typical bedroom. It was pristine. Nothing was out of order, but also Jennifer was not there. Now, we can't ever be sure of how much or how little was taken, other than the fact that we know the big things that weren't. So, like, her coat was still there. This was February of 1987. It was 28 degrees that night in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, her coat was still there, the only coat that she wore all the time. She left her contacts were still in the room. And so these are things to consider for the camp of people who tend to think more of like a runaway situation. Okay, would she leave she gets pissed and fed up with her dad and she decides to leave. We've learned that Jennifer seems to be a little bit more resourceful than this. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they say that when they got into the room, her bed was made the way it had been before. But the blinds that were covering the glass, like the sliding glass door, were askew in a way that they say looked like she would have been looking out the window. Okay. Now, this one gets picked apart too, because people either believe that, like either she heard something and looked out, or she was expecting someone and looking out. Mm-hmm. And then other people will say, I couldn't tell you what my kids' blinds looked like if I had to. Like, those thin plastic horizontal blinds back then that really, I don't know if they had any animals. Let's say they had a cat. It jumps on it one time and the blinds are askew. So like this could mean something or it could mean absolutely nothing. And frustratingly so, that's kind of the case with most of the points within this story, okay, within this case. So nothing was out of place. And later, like I said, they say the only thing that was missing was her purse, but not her clothes, contacts, etc. When her friends are interviewed to this day, they will say, okay, if she was running away, that's wild. Because I guess Jennifer was notorious for bringing too many clothes everywhere she went. So even if she was just spending the night at a girlfriend's house for the night, she'd bring way more than she needed. And so they kind of joke amongst themselves about just kind of she was known for that. So that none of her now adult girlfriends think that she would have left the house with just minimal anything. I know someone else like that, and his name is Brian Sanders. So let's go back to the note found on her bed. This is undoubtedly one, if not the most bizarre part of this entire case. This note. The note actually becomes the crux of the whole thing. So it's almost like this would be the center of a wagon wheel, and then you take all of the theories and hypotheses and potential suspects and you just litter them around it because it's wild. So the note was in a messy handwriting that had like multiple scratched out, like heavily scratched out words throughout. And it read as though someone else, like it's meant to read as though someone else wrote it with Jennifer at their side, but like not in duress. Okay. All right. So let me read to you. This is going to be a portion of it, but it's really kind of the meat of it all. And so it starts by saying, your daughter's with me. She's fine. It starts by saying Mr. and Mrs. Pandos. Okay. Your daughter's with me. She's fine. She's having some problems and needs some time away. So then it switches to first person, but in quotation marks. So like quotation marks are written and it says, I'm fine. I just need time to think. Both of you please go to work tomorrow because I will try to call you. I won't call you at home, only at one of y'all's work. Do not call the police. I can easily find out if you do. I may never come back home. Don't tell my friends about this. Just tell them I'm sick. She also says, cancel my doctor's appointment on Friday. Okay. So a whole lot to unpack here. I'm going to continue on, and we are coming back to this letter because we're going to have to kind of dig into that a little bit and break down some of that sentence structure and kind of what it says. But again, this is where I tell you that it's reminiscent of JonBenet in the sense of every time you get confused with JonBenet or think you're onto something, then there's that damn letter again. Not because I think it was actually a ransom note. Please do not confuse that. I don't when it comes to JonBenet. but it comes to whether or not was it an intruder, right? Was it someone inside the home? And so we're kind of looking at those same questions here with Jennifer in that kind of way. So just put that little note in a box and tuck it in the back of your head. So we're going to come back to that. But Margie says that she thought from the get-go, she says she thought the note was real and that it had come from Jennifer. Now, if you watch the documentary or watch much with Margie at all, you're going to see at this point an elderly woman who is recounting all of these details from decades ago. She'll get flustered sometimes. She sometimes can't remember the details. That's a problem for some people who say this is the one time ever that you should probably remember most of the things, because everything else she's a bit specific on. So, we'll see. But she says that when they ask what her initial impression of that note was, she thought it was real, in the sense of she thought what it said was true and real, and that Jennifer had part in it being written. So in accordance with the note's instructions, Margie and Ron go to work. Remember, it told them to go to work. They didn't call police. They made up stories to Jennifer's friends about where she was, because you have to imagine these girls are calling home. Jennifer really didn't ever call out sick. She wasn't home often. So her friends are calling, and they tell them different things. And so we know this later when the girls talk to each other, right? Like, oh, I was told she was sick. Oh, I was told she went on a trip. What are you thinking?
So they get into the biggest fight, it sounds like. Right?
Well, I don't know if it was the biggest fight.
Well, maybe not the biggest, but
that was the last thing we know of that happened. Correct.
Fight. Yes. She calls him Ronald, that sort of thing, then gets off her phone. But then the next morning, right? Is that what we're saying? The next morning is when he had to force his way in the bedroom, right? And they find this note.
Yeah.
And then they're just going to follow what she's supposedly outlining in this note. Yeah. This daughter that was so disrespectful the night before. Good clarification. Now, it's important to know Jennifer had briefly run away prior. Okay.
But it was very, very brief. It was without pomp and circumstance. It certainly was not with a letter written. So for those who think she ran away again because she has done this previously, it doesn't, to me, make much sense that she's staging a letter in third person as though she's not her to run away. She would just go.
I was just going to say.
She doesn't care what she would want them to know, like, screw y'all. Like, no, I'm gone.
Anytime somebody's missing, you always want to know, have they done this before?
Right.
And if they did, in what manner did they do it? Especially
not like
with the
this.
juvenile. Yeah.
Right. But because of this was largely considered a runaway case early on. So when I talk about it not super, I think as of maybe even still, but I think the Charlie Project still had it listed as like maybe endangered missing, but like some of them had runaway for the longest time as like the category, and we've seen this predominantly like longer ago. I think that in more recent years, kids aren't always looked at as runaways right off the rip. They try to look at it as actually investigate first. But excuse me. So, like I said, Ron and Margie are following the instructions of this letter, which was go to work, don't contact the police, don't tell my friends what I've done, tell them I'm sick, cancel my doctor's appointment, by the way, because all these 15-year-olds remember that they have doctor's appointments to start with. False. Much less are astute enough to remind you to cancel them. So just be thinking about who knows these things about Jennifer. Clearly, this isn't a stranger, at least. I'm not saying it has to be within the home, but it's not a stranger. Okay. So finally, about 3 days later, they call the police. And now the investigation can start. Okay. Ron and Margie followed the instructions of this note almost to a T, all except for one thing that was requested, and that was to put money in Jennifer's account. So you could look at it like they're angry and they're thinking, well, I'm not going to fund your runaway time. if they truly believe that she ran away. Others will say that they don't think they put money in that account because they felt like it was pointless because they knew that she would never use it because she wasn't around any longer. So that can kind of be looked at either way at this point in the case. So let's look at it from kind of a broader lens now. As Stephen began to want to kind of look into his sister's disappearance and get to the bottom of it, new information became available. Okay, so Stephen's idea, I'll go on and tell you his idea, and the whole premise for that documentary that he headed up was that he firmly, I think he would have leveraged his mortgage on this. He would say as much, firmly believes that his father killed his sister, even be it accidentally in a form of rage or a fight that took place. And for the longest time, believed that his mother was coerced in writing the letter. He and those around him kind of go back and forth on whether or not they believe Margie was actually involved in a murder or a cover-up or assistance with disposal or these kinds of things. And then some people believe that Ron did do this, but that Margie has actually no knowledge of it, and he kept her out of the information loop here. But that has been Stephen's angle this whole time. All right. So as Stephen began to kind of look into it, like I said, new information starts coming out. So you need to know that this happened in 1987. So in 1990, this would be 3 years later, right? Jennifer's disappearance was in 87. Margie and Ron wind up going separate ways. They divorce, and Ron moves to Texas, and Margie moves to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
So again, public perception, kind of looks a certain way here in the sense of people will say often families don't move, right? When they have a child that has gone missing, or at least not for some very long time. And it's been 3 years. So, was there already strain in the marriage? Did this just cause strain in the marriage, or was there more at play here? That's something that we just don't know the answer to at this point. So every time a document was requested, it seemingly couldn't be found. Okay. Meaning as Stephen is looking into the case more, think late, like the first decade of the 2000s into like mid 2000s, leading up to then eventually the documentary being worked on in like 19 or 20. When things were requested, the police department there would say they just couldn't find it. So finally it was determined that the original case file, like the whole case file for Jennifer's disappearance, was missing. The records room and the evidence room were said to have been searched multiple times over the years, but to no avail. And now we do talk about this. We just talked about it with George Hodel with the Black Dahlia a couple of weeks ago, and how evidence had been missing. Now that one was a little bit different. So it doesn't always point to corruption, right? It can really just be negligence, like just benign negligence. Things can get checked out that don't get checked back in. Things can get lost. Things can be deemed to like just not like accidentally trash, whatever, but accidents can happen. But either way, her entire case file could not be found. So it was difficult. I think those that want to kind of slap Stephen on the wrist for going so hard into his own kind of tunnel vision with thinking about that his father did this and his mom helped cover it up by writing the note. And he may not be wrong about that, by the way, or he could be, right? So people who get frustrated that was what he picked and that's what he's trying to prove have to also remember, number one, it was his sister. It was his abusive father. He has good reason to feel the way he felt, at least. But as he's trying, he has his own lawyer, private investigator, the documentary crew, right? And so they're trying to figure this out and put some heat under this case, but they have nothing to reference. So they can't even, all they have is what Ron and Margie say happened. They don't know exactly what these interviews looked like when Jennifer first went missing. They don't know exactly who police talked to or what evidence they had or, didn't have, because that case file is not there for them to base this information off of. So they're really just kind of thinking of things, just kind of out of thin air with any circumstantial evidence they already have. So as more questions were asked, strange things started happening. For instance, Margie produced the original note found on Jennifer's bed, meaning she was sitting down for a polygraph many, many years later. Not initially. She wasn't polyed initially. And when they said, do you have any information that we don't have? Do you have any information that we don't know about or that we don't have pertaining to Jennifer's disappearance? She got kind of quiet, and then she just stopped and said, well, I have the letter. Do you want the note? No, she wasn't acting like she wanted to hide it, but she wanted to make sure they knew that she had it. And they're like, yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, I thought they would have had the note.
Well, so then that's what people say.
Okay.
That they thought they would have had it. So this is where it gets a little convoluted in the sense that the original, if you're watching this documentary, you're watching him kind of in real time find these things out. So that's why we know more now, because you see it, like the progression of things. So immediately this was a red flag, because everyone's thought, and rightfully so, was that letter would be in an evidence bag with the case file. So how does Margie have it? So does this mean that she's up to no good? Does she somehow have this note when she shouldn't have it? Or were the police just kind of dummies in the moment and didn't take it with them, right? Like, we don't know. But Stephen's thought, like the way he was told the story was that they did have the note. And then you realize they had a photocopied note, right? But keep this in the back of your mind because it's important. So she produces this note, and then that's where we have what we had that I just read to you. So, excuse me. So she also had Jennifer's dental records. These were thought to have also been at the department. Okay. Which would also make sense. So Ron was very good friends in the late 80s. Ron, so the dad, okay, so keep track with me here, was good friends when they lived in that home with the head of security in their gated community. This dude, they like played golf together. They hung out. Ron's friends with this guy. This guy, head of security, his wife was the secretary at the police department that investigated Jennifer's disappearance. Okay. So it was a concern that maybe Ron had been able to obtain the case file early on to either tamper with it, remove things, or even just to get information on what police had, right? So that they would know what. So we cannot prove that that's what happened, but that was the concern. That's the concern Stephen had and some others early on. Like, how does mom have this stuff? And not even implicating her, really. Not that she was some mastermind. I'm not trying to be hateful here, but when you watch a lot of interviews with her and stuff, you're not going to come away, I think, with the intuition that she was the big mastermind behind any kind of big event. She certainly is a follower, it seems. That's kind of the take I get. And it's kind of sometimes like by happenstance with her, like she has these things. So it could stand to reason that Ron was able to illegally obtain these records. And then at some point over the years, they just were in the house and she just has them. Right. So that's one train of thought. But this goes on for a little while, but as Stephen and eventually the documentary crew dug some more, miraculously, like as more heat was put on the department. So now it's like 2007, I believe, this woman named Wendy. Wendy was a police officer with that department. She had newly gotten on there, and she sees on the bulletin board, some information and the missing photo from 30 years prior from the case of Jennifer Pandos, right? So she sees that and it really intrigued her. So she was kind of the first one at that department in all those years to kind of start putting fire under this case and kind of getting into it, right? So when she does this is around the time Stephen is also looking into his sister's case. So around 2007, 2008 is when Stephen and Wendy, that police officer, kind of start working together. And now the people who have trouble with Wendy will say that she was haste in some of her thoughts. She also took Stephen's narrative and kind of ran with it, and it may or may not have colored the investigation early on. But either way, at that time, she's also looking for the case file. She cannot find it anywhere. So she's now working at the department. 30 years later, she cannot find it in evidence room for some reason. It wasn't like misplaced in the records room. But as they're making the documentary around 2020, 2021, they get a call from Jake Rice, who was now the more current lead on like the now cold case of Jennifer Pandos, who says, "Oh, hey, Steven, I got some stuff here you may be interested in looking at." And Steven's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It's Jennifer's case file."
Okay.
So Steven says, "Okay, this was like a bomb. This was like the blow poke moment of the staircase with Michael Peterson." Okay. And so Steven's like, "Whoa, like I've hung everything on this. Like, where is it? What can I get into it?" Well, now he can't get into a lot because now it's an ongoing investigation and now we got right.
Yeah.
But he's like, where was it? It was on the floor of the records room.
I believe that.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll say it in this way. Every department operates a little differently when it comes to records. And handwritten records back in the day was a complete nightmare.
That can be true.
So
I believe that.
When I first got hired on the department, I wasn't even in the police academy yet. They just stuck us in a big, like a vault, and you had to file these reports.
Okay.
So, and the missing person back then would probably stay with the lead detective until they archive it.
Well, that's a good point to clarify, particularly if they're looking at it as a missing person, because they had said in their own words early on, like foul play wasn't really suspected.
Right.
So maybe that one was not necessarily of the utmost importance, if you will, or put in a more visible area in the room.
Yeah, and especially if the note thing, that's just weird. They could have even looked at that and said, "Hey, she's run away before. The family doesn't seem too concerned. You know, here's this weird note, whatever." And not looking at the way we would look at it, like right now, or even currently, how a lot of departments would treat it as maybe a potential kidnapping or something a little bit different like that, and lock a scene down and do things maybe a little bit differently. But as far as like a report or a case jacket, like being on the record floor, I could see that.
Okay. And even if, not to push back, but to clarify, it's now been, gosh, whatever, what I say, so like 30 something years, 33 years. And if we were to believe, and maybe they didn't search that hard, right? When they said they were looking for it. But if we were to believe that they were searching for it, we still feel like, or with the advent of more digital documentation or things changing, like at this point, they haven't maybe moved around things in there or changed up anything in there. Or
oh yeah, and once everything goes digital, most people aren't even going to access those handwritten reports anymore. Those rooms.
Well, I guess if they're asked to produce this or find it.
Yeah, then they go looking for it, and then who knows?
It's dusty. Somebody's jacket's on top of it from 10 years ago. I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, so that's the information that we're given anyway, right? But it also then, lends to, like, so for anyone who thought that Ron was, illegally obtaining these records, maybe he had and got him slid back in, or maybe he didn't. And really this whole time, while that looked like something super conspicuous and super, like he's hiding all this stuff and he'd been stealing the records because he was friends with the guy whose wife worked there. Maybe that's not what happened at all. But it just kind of adds another layer. There's just a lot of weirdness with this case. I could say that the whole time. So there it was the whole time. But Margie will say, when she was asked about it, did you ever see this at home? Was it ever at your house? Did you ever find these records or anything to do, like the documentation from the police department on Jennifer's disappearance? And she'll say, I can't say for sure that I laid eyes on it, but there is something in me that wants to say that Ron did have that. Now, it's just tough in this whole.
So then maybe they weren't.
It's the whole time.
Maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, or maybe not. Yeah. Or maybe she's, kind of trained her brain to start believing this too after all these years. I mean, you got to understand she's much older now and it's been many, many years. So either way, eventually, I believe it was 07-ish, Margie was offered, maybe 09, was offered immunity for everything but homicide. So at this point, if you remember, I told you about the police officer, Wendy, she and Steven, and they're hammering down on Margie, to the point that Margie's not allowed to be around his grown daughters. She was not at his wedding. He is cordial with her in a cold shoulder kind of way, but just very factual. and he'll tell her he loves her and he'll always be there with her. He just needs her to be honest about what she knows.
Okay.
And so they have Margie in a room. She's being talked to again, being questioned again. And they put on the table, listen, you have full immunity outside of homicide. I mean, so if you're not exactly sure what that means, she could say that she helped dispose of the body. Am I correct there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms
they'd
of,
have to be able to prove it. But yes, if she's part
sure,
of
but my point is that, like, if they could prove what she's saying, yes, she could have been way more complicit than just writing a note. Mm-hmm. And as long as she wasn't part of Jennifer being murdered, she does not go to jail. She does not see jail time. She is clean as a whistle and can go about her life. And so that's why her son was getting so frustrated and saying, Mom, just say it. Like, you're good. You can say it now. Don't, there's nothing to hide anymore. You can just say everything you know. And she's getting shaken because she's saying, I can't tell you what I don't know. I don't know anything. And Wendy's all but about to lose her mind in this room. So is Stephen. There's pounding on the table. There's cussing. He takes a breather by walking away. Wendy's yelling at her. But she's saying adamantly, I don't know. I really don't know. So Margie will say, if you put her down to it, to be very specific on what she thinks happens. Now, when she was first asked where she thought Jennifer was, not first as in 1987, but as years went on, and they, clearly realized that note was not something Jennifer had written. Margie will say, they said, well, where do you think she is? And she said, I think she's in the river, on the railroad tracks, or in the woods. Now, while some people think, well, that's terrible, why would you think that? Years had gone by, and they did have a large body of water by their home. It butted up to a large tree line full of woods, and there was a railroad track right there. And I think she was saying something happened to her close, and that's where she was put. Now, when asked if she thinks that Ron, did this, she goes back and forth. And of course she'll say, and of course they divorced years and years ago, but of course she doesn't want to think that he did something like that. She also is pretty open to saying that she certainly thinks that's an option.
Okay. That
he could have. Okay. So that's kind of her take on it. So a woman named Wendy, I just told you about that police officer. So when they are in that interrogation room at like around 09 or so, and she's getting so frustrated with her and getting kind of heated with this interview process. In fact, here's a picture from that time. If you're new here, if you're just listening on like audio streaming and you're not watching us tonight on YouTube, then I'll put these on the Andrea Up Late Instagram page. So you'll get to see any photos there that we have. But there's Margie in the yellow there. That's Cagney from Cagney and Lacey in the corner. I kid. But it's just another female officer, and that's Wendy up in the closest corner to your right, and Stephen's arm is standing there. What, that's not Cagney?
No, that's a dead ringer.
Okay.
I would have, yeah.
So Margie's in this interview room, and Wendy then says to her, do you want me to say in front of Stephen what he doesn't know already? Do you want me? Because she says, Margie was saying, I've told you everything I know. I've told you everything. I've always talked to you. And Wendy's saying, like, you have not always talked to us. And so Wendy says, I called you 7 times, Margie. I called you 7 times with questions. You didn't know if I was calling to tell you I know where Jennifer was, or that we had found her body, or that we arrested someone. She said, you did not answer me after 7 phone calls. And we realized when we searched your electronics, that in the meantime, you emailed Ron. So she was emailing Ron, saying, what do I do? They want to talk to me. What do you want me to say to them? Is it okay if I talk to them?
Oh.
His emails back say something along the lines of, I don't know what they want. I don't know what to tell you, whatever, And so when they confront her with this in that interview room in the mid-2000s, and they say, why did you do that? Why were you you have to understand what this looks like. You're emailing him, asking him how to go about talking to us when you don't even know why we're calling. And Margie said, this is when she says, well, I just thought he was driving that bus, talking about Ron. this is about the time that Stephen loses it, leaves out of the interrogation room because he's like, I'm going to lose my mind, you know?
Yeah.
But I think this is a good time to talk a little bit about victim mentality, though. Because this can go either way. I mean, she could fully have written the letter. She could have known exactly what Ron did. Ron could have done it and kept her in the closet the whole time. Hell, maybe Ron didn't do it. We don't know right now. We've got some more information to present to you. But we know about the cycle of abuse. We know about, you know, it's the same idea. We've talked about it often when we talk about domestic violence. Like, why do women stay? Why do women, you know? And remember, Stephen will say that his mom was not complicit in abusing him. She did not hurt him. She also didn't prevent it from happening. And his words were that she removed herself. And I find that it seems that Margie removes herself a lot. And so when she says, I thought he was driving the bus, she almost sounds like a child. It's not that she sounded so much like a guilty person. It's almost like she felt like she couldn't make a decision without Ron's input. You know, and so I don't know, you know, there's going to be more still out there that we don't know yet that hopefully will come out soon. And I'll tell you about those updates, but yeah, what's up?
Why didn't Ron just call? If Ron's driving the bus, why wouldn't Ron just be, oh yeah, I'll call her. I'll take care of it.
They weren't talking a ton. I mean, they're living in two different states and they're divorced.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Which
you know what
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like that. Like
Ron's interesting. I think he was a bit hands off from Margie and from the cops. I mean, like, he answered their questions. He did, you know, he was there and present for this stuff, but I don't know that he was trying to jump in to save the sinking ship with Margie. If she's having trouble, you deal with them. I don't want to talk to him. But it doesn't look good. You know, there's a lot of things in this case where their actions just don't look good. It certainly points fingers at them, and maybe rightfully so, or maybe not. We've also had cases where people were just so difficult to watch or be around in the aftermath of, you know, tragedy, and then you realize like somebody else fully was on the hook for this. They weren't. They just happened to be like not the best people or whatever. So it's hard to know at this point, but that was a very interesting thing. But keep in your mind what I told you that Wendy said about the phone calls. So Margie corroborates that. She doesn't deny that happened, but we're going to learn a little bit more because all Wendy and Stephen had to go off of, remember, they didn't have that case file. So all they have to go off of is what they learned early on, which was, they didn't really talk to us. They didn't put up search posters. They didn't seem concerned. We find out that's not exactly true once we get the new case file or the old case file. So it's tough. So let's talk quickly about other potential leads. Actually, we're just going to talk quickly about this one. I don't put as much weight on this guy. I don't know. I could be wrong here as some, but so Kerry Hendricks is his name. And he's also in the documentary. They did do a good job of interviewing pretty much everyone that could have potentially been around at that time. You know, he's an old man now though. So like, he doesn't look the way he looked then. He doesn't stand as straight as he stood then. He doesn't appear as strong as he would have then. And his demeanor is softer. So it is tough when you interview, and I think particularly with men, when you interview a man who's now, let's say in his 70s, who was, you know, stronger and agile and whatever at 40, let's say, you know, it's just a very different picture. Hell, look at Ed Kemper today and see, I mean, like, honestly, it's, you know, it's hard to align, and we know what he did for a fact, right? So it's hard to align what you see now in jail at 70 something years old to what could have been back then. But either way, so Kerry Hendricks was a local character. He had recently gotten a divorce. He had a couple kids. So he's a single dad there. And so he had these like teenage girls that would come babysit for him because he had a job. So that makes sense. You know, often I always say I'm going to make a shirt of it when I say, can you be a creep and not a murderer? Yep, you can. And we find over and over again in these cases that a lot of the cast of characters, like the supporting actors, if you will, in a crime, may not paint themselves in the best light because of their actions, but maybe they don't have anything to do with the actual crime at hand. So you would think that maybe he would know as a grown man that when you have the teenage girls over to babysit, you don't offer them beer or pot if they want it. Or maybe you do. You know, it was the 80s. fun times. You know what I mean? So the girls will talk about that. And so as they were interviewed now as adults, they'll say, like, what did you think about that? But they all say the same thing. None of the women who now are grown that were her friends at the time when they took turns babysitting here and there for him said anything bad in the sense of that he hurt them or made them feel uneasy. Now, 2 of her friends will say that about her dad. They didn't like being at her house because he made them feel uneasy, not sexually or whatever, but I think he had a short fuse. He's not a very pleasant man. And you can see that in the documentary as well. There's nothing warm, that comes across with him. But with this guy, they don't really say anything bad. They just say, yeah, like, oh, what did I think about it? I thought it was awesome. I'm a teenager
Right.
and I go get paid to babysit and then he offers me a beer. Like, of course I think it's now as an adult, I don't think it is. Right. Like, so that's kind of their take on it. But Carrie, people will look at that and say, oh, could he be the quote father figure? How the note on her bed was worded. I'm like a father figure to her. Right. So could that have been Carrie because he felt that way? A lot of things come into play here. Did he come into her gated community and was unseen?
Right. And then decided, let's sit in the bedroom and write a note.
Which he could have done because in theory, the note is supposed to look like she's sitting, like not like she's bound or dead or anything, that she's sitting with him like, yeah, let's write my parents a note. But he'll say now, like, I knew her and she helped me out some, but it's not like that. Like, I don't know. What doesn't help Carrie is that he has a couple of charges. And now he will say these days that back then he wasn't the best guy in the sense of petty crime stuff. Like, he did drugs, he ran drugs, he drank, he whatever. And they knew him around town. And so the way he talks now is that, if like he was going to be on the hook for whatever it was. And so if something happened, they were, so he has the official charge was attempted kidnapping of a teenager.
Okay.
And he says his story on that is that, that he was going to rob her, like not hurt her, but like literally get in her vehicle and get her purse out. And then she ran after and he started the truck and he didn't actually kidnap her or whatever. And he says that was never the intent.
Yeah. He just took her to a different location.
I don't even know that I don't.
Meaning like the criminal element.
Oh yeah. I don't even think they left in the they even went anywhere because they're calling it attempted kidnapping. But he's like, no, that wasn't even the attempt. I was trying to steal her stuff. Like I was trying to take her purse.
Yeah.
Whether he's right or not. But so when they look at it and they're like, oh, he has attempted kidnapping on a teenage girl. He has this and this and that charge. Oh, could he be the father figure that wrote the note and did something with Jennifer? So I don't have a picture of him there. Here's another picture of Mom Margie. This is brother Stephen. That's from the documentary. Obviously, you can kind of tell that. This is Stephen on the left, Margie on the right, with the missing poster of Jennifer there in the middle. This is Dad. So this is Ron these days. He's remarried. He's been remarried a couple of times, but that's him these days, just so you kind of have an idea there. Here is that letter. So when I talked to you about the writing.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, you like that handwriting? So when I told you earlier that they harkened on handwriting, in my opinion, entirely too much. Everything came down to, can we include or exclude whichever person based on the handwriting of this letter? And so sometimes it would be, let's say, person A, and they would say the whole time, like, nope, he's excluded. Nope, 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 nope. And then like 10 years go by and they're like, oh, we found this one note he wrote one time. And actually now I can't exclude him from this. Like literally that happens with one of our suspects. So this is where it says, Mr. and Mrs. Pandos, your daughter is with me. She is fine. She is having some problems though. She needs some time away from this place. 3 to 5 days max. That's written, by the way, like the number 3-5. It does seem juvenile, I will say. There's a lot about the way this is written that seems juvenile. Yeah. She is like a daughter to me. And in my brain, if it's juvenile, you're trying to throw yourself off of being a juvenile, right? And I am like a dad to her. Here are some of Jennifer's quotes That's what it says. Here are some of Jennifer's quotes. And then in quotation marks, it says, I'm fine. I just need time to think. And then it just kind of goes on with the rest of the stuff that I read you. Now, this letter, so they say the whole time that Dad is excluded, that was never Ron's handwriting. Margie, Mom, has been included or excluded, depending on which handwriting analysis expert, if you will, they speak with. I don't even think they ever viewed Carrie too much as a suspect, but he was excluded from it. They say Jennifer is excluded as well. And if you think Jennifer wrote this note about herself, but there was a long time thought that she's left-handed, that she had used her non-dominant hand to write the letter, to skew it, to throw off her parents. I don't entertain Jennifer writing this letter at all for a myriad of reasons. And if she just wanted to run away, again, I think she would have just run away like she has before. There's no need to, why write a letter to stage it to not look like it's even her writing it? Because it wasn't staged to look like a ransom. Like there was she didn't write it as though a man was doing something bad to her. Like, I'm taking her and I want money. And like, it was like, she needs time away to think. Like, I'm just going to go hang out. So I will say that the cops early on considered this to look staged. That wasn't ever a question, but they said that it looks like it came from someone with intimate knowledge of her, which would make sense when you look at the piece that says, about the cancel my doctor's appointment on Friday. Someone had to have known she had a doctor's appointment on Friday because she did. That was accurate information, but that's your visual for the note, at least. So now let's talk about Tony Tobler. Remember, we spoke on him earlier. He was the boyfriend. They had gotten pregnant, had the abortion at 15. Tumultuous on and off again. He winds up dating a girl named Corey. They are now married with children, by the way. Corey is in the documentary. This is Tony and Corey now. If you see her control of his hand on her knee, it may look like a sweet gesture. I will tell you, if he looks frightened of her, he probably should be. The whole time his arm is usually kind of hooked under her left arm there. He's kind of got it like her arms around it and then holding it, which, you and I are touchy. So if we sit together, we probably got a hand on a knee or leaned in. I understand that. This felt different. Okay. And I would, if you guys watch this documentary, come back to me and let me know what you thought, because I had a certain kind of feeling when I watched these two. And I will tell you that I felt like she controlled this interview with him a good bit. She's really not incredibly significant in the case, other than she's the girl that was dating him when Jennifer wanted to be. But in terms of before that and after and all the other things that we do know, but she kind of inserts herself here with this documentary. But let's digress and go back and take a look. This is Jennifer and Tony as teenagers. So Tony, like I said, was the new kid on the block. He was kind of new to town. So because of that, he was turning the girls' heads because they said, oh, he was fun and he was new and we didn't know him and we thought he was cute and whatever. And he'll say, oh, I lived in the trailer park when a lot of these kids lived in this upper scale community, whatever. It doesn't matter. But that's part of, I guess, why Ron wasn't a big fan of Tony's. So Tony Tobler. So that's their backstory a little bit. So I told you they had some interesting body language, he and Corey, in the documentary. It was definitely off. But I didn't love that he starts out distancing himself from Jennifer, or so it kind of seems. So he starts out by saying, like, yeah, I knew her. And they're like, well, do you think she could have run away? Like, do you think that you knew her well? Did you know her like really well? And he said, well, I knew her because I knew her. I mean, are you asking if I know every side of her? I guess I didn't know every side of her. Like, but like they were dozens of notes and letters. They got pregnant. They went through a very big experience of having an abortion together. Like, you knew her, like you know what I mean? Like, you knew her. And so he really kind of minimizes his closeness with her in this documentary, at least, which is just, the little bit that we have to go off of. So like I said, kind of like they were acquaintances more so. So early on, he was never considered a suspect, but things then kind of get strange. Okay. So there was a man named Charlie May. So Charlie's got like the one arm, whatever. I guess, only had one arm for a long time. It really won't play into it. They talk about it in the documentary a good bit. But he was a friend of Tony's. So Tony actually distanced himself from Charlie May as well in this documentary. The way he speaks on, he's like, yeah, I knew him. Yeah, I knew who he was. Well, Charlie at this point is kind of a vagrant. They literally had to go through different resources to try to track him down just to interview him. He was sitting on the side of a road with a sign for this documentary. So they found him. They take him to a hotel room, sit down with him, interview him. And so he certainly has a different take on how well he knew Tony than Tony does. So Tony says that, yeah, he kind of knew him. But if you go back and look at those notes, which would have been fantastic to do early on in the investigation, between Tony and Jennifer, they reference Charlie May often, to the point that Jennifer knows who Charlie May is. Okay. Jennifer talks about Charlie May. Not bad, good, or indifferent. Just like, oh, are you hanging out with Charlie today? What are, like, so there's no doubt that they all three knew each other well. But again, in this documentary, Tony's kind of, if you didn't know better, you would think that he and Jennifer might have went on like 2 dates and he had heard of Charlie May around town. Like it, and so I feel like that's something to consider. So Charlie was contacted, like I said, and interviewed during the making of this documentary. And he said something incredibly strange. He did a few strange things there. He said that Tony, back in 1987, around the time of Jennifer's disappearance, right before he knew about it, called Charlie May, and said that he had a question. He wanted to know how best to get rid of a body. So Charlie, as one does, very normally responds with, well, you're going to have to get yourself a barrel. And Tony asks where he's going to find a barrel like that. And he said, well, often at construction sites. So if you go to a construction site, you'll see some of these big 50-gallon barrels. And you're going to want to fill it with acid. And you are going to want to dispose of the body that way. And so when asked, Charlie, about that, well, what? Okay, well, you just gave him advice. What were your thoughts here? What was going through your head when Tony, 17-year-old Tony, called you to ask you this question?
Why ask you, Charlie? You getting rid of bodies?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so Charlie said, he said, I thought he was just joking. I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just a joke, My friends often call me and ask me how to get rid of bodies, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot.
All the time. I mean, it's just a joke, though. Like, they don't mean it.
Yeah. People would preface that. Oh, if you were going to rob a bank, how would you do it? But if somebody calls you, hey,
and he gave no other context. There wasn't like, oh, we were having this conversation, or we were discussing this current event in the news, or what, whatever, right? So weird. So that's how he told him to do it. That was his advice. And he said he thought it was a joke. But let's talk about that. Like, legitimately, if what Charlie is saying is true, if Tony Tobler at 17 years old, this kid, if he's like, hey, yo, I got a task ahead of me. How am I going to perform this? Did he on his own, granted, he was never seen, did he go to Jennifer's house, write a note before or after, let's say after he's done something that caused her harm, and then she's not big, but she's dead weight, let's say, if this is what Charlie is saying happened, and on his own, Tony is going to remove her from the home. Again, he's just going to lock her bedroom door. No noise is happening. Mom and dad aren't waking up for anything. He's going to get her in and then out, shut the sliding glass door back, by the way, which you could have just left it open, I imagine, because you've left a note that she's gone. So that's not really a question. But the door's shut. I thought that was kind of weird, because I'm thinking, okay, if that's what happened, like, whoever did this actually could have just left the sliding glass door open, because they've left a note saying that she's willingly going somewhere. What's the big deal? Yeah. So, but then he's going to have the strength and wherewithal and discreetness to rob a construction site of a barrel, maybe, right? Maybe it's nighttime. They didn't have cameras back then. He gets a barrel. He's able to then store her body in the meantime somewhere. So he's got it somewhere. Were the drag marks in the grass? Did he drive into her house? Because again, it's a gated community with a security guard on duty. No one saw anyone coming to her from the house. So did he walk there and just, did he walk there and carry her back when she was incapacitated? Right. So think about this. If you're believing what Charlie May says, how could this have really happened? So now did Tony, on top of that, fill a 50-gallon barrel? First of all, is he obtaining that much acid? The acid at construction sites is not exactly the same kind of acid that you use to dissolve a body. Ask our buddy Jeff, right? Jeffrey Dahmer used the muric acid. That's actually what is part of what got him caught, because it's so stinky. Like the smell that people got from his apartment wasn't even from the decomposing bodies so much as it was that acid had a very distinct smell. So it sounds like Charlie's already directing him toward acid that wouldn't do the job. Then if you watch Breaking Bad, you know that it's got to be the right kind of acid that will dissolve a body, but not the barrel. Right?
Yeah.
So if it's a metal barrel, even harder, because now it's that much heavier. And he's got a body. Let's say Jennifer was 100 pounds, 100 extra pounds, the weight of the barrel and the weight of the liquid. And then on his own, he puts it by a railroad track, is what Charlie winds up saying he says happened later on. But it was also, by the way, a barrel with a decomposing body was never, it's not like that ever came to light either, where somebody's like, oh, what is all this liquid in here? So, but that's what Charlie said happened. Okay. So I'm just kind of walking you guys through that because, people say things and be like, whoa, that's crazy. Tony did it. Maybe, but not the way Charlie is saying happened. Yeah. Okay. But that's a lot of detail that Tony's got out. I mean, that Charlie's got, right? So could Tony have done it with Charlie's help? Maybe. Jennifer knew Charlie. It wouldn't be weird for Charlie to be at her house with Tony. These are things to consider too, I think. If he knows that much about it and he's telling you all about it, but he's saying Tony did it alone. Yeah. But he knew Jennifer. He knew, okay? So keep that in mind. So let's go back again to Dad, to Ron, briefly, okay? We're going to talk about cadaver dogs. So in 2004, there was someone renting the townhome, and he graciously allowed investigators come in with cadaver dogs. I think it was 2004. I think it was quite a few years after her disappearance. And they hit on a spot in the living room and then a spot down below the house. So there was kind of like a walk-in crawl space situation under the house and like storage. You might put your mower or some sleds or whatever, lawn equipment in there. So the dogs hit on a spot in the living room and then a spot down below the home. Okay. So take that for what you will. Also not an exact science. I'd almost gather that it's more so than handwriting, but so Ron evidently told Margie just a couple weeks, few days after Jennifer's disappearance that he was going to visit his parents. They lived up, I want to say Pennsylvania. Please don't quote me, but they lived far away. There was a distance. Okay. Some think this may have been if Ron did this when he could have disposed of her remains. Like potentially he had kept her in the storage unit until then. Again, it was February. It's cold outside. There winds up being snow on the ground. So that's plausible. I mean, that could happen, I guess. We find out that he actually, during that trip, did not go see his parents. When he did finally tell his parents months later about Jennifer, he said that he kept telling them that she was on a trip. He told the cousins in the family she was on a trip. That's why she was not at her brother's wedding when he got married. And I think he never told his parents that she had disappeared. So that's Ron. So it's kind of, and if you want to look into Carrie Hendricks more, the dad babysitting guy, fine. My radar is a bit off of him. But if we're kind of going back and forth on a dad, Ron, and boyfriend Tony situation, That's why I'm going back and forth with these scenarios to remember. So back to Tony, the boyfriend. In 2022, a grand jury hearing was held. So this was a bombshell. This happened, it might have been actually 23, during the making of the documentary. So people call it a secret grand jury. By nature, they're secret. Am I right? Like, you don't let the world know.
Yeah, it may. Was that the term they used? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is the term the documentary folks called it, a secret grand jury. But my point is, if they're trying to indict or want to lay out evidence in this case, they don't need the whole town to know all about this. I think the point was that they were saying, like, why wasn't Stephen notified? Why wasn't the rest of the Pandos family notified that this was taking place?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, because this isn't really for the family.
Mm-hmm.
This is for investigators and prosecutors to come together to find out, to present a case and to see if they can indict. So this was held, and this was kind of bombshell, because the people that were required to attend, or at least summons to attend, the people that were filmed going into and out of the building during this grand jury hearing were the most current lead investigator on the case, Jake Rice,
mm-hmm.
and Charlie May, and Tony Tobler.
Or the three that went in to talk to the grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Charlie May, again, if you remember, he's the one that gives you the story about the acid and the barrel that he says Tony asked him about. And Tony, of course, was the boyfriend. So that's who went to this grand jury meeting or whatever, hearing or whatever happened. DNA and handwriting analysis are still inconclusive from the letter on the bed, in the sense that Tony has not been excluded. So DNA analysis has not excluded what was found on there, Tony, from the letter. They cannot definitively say DNA on there was Tony's, but they also cannot. But keep in mind that letter has been in Margie's underwear drawer or whatever. Like, it's been at her house for a million years. Okay. So when Margie was offered immunity, remember this? Remember me talking to you about this and the phone calls with Wendy, the cop, and all that stuff? Pressure was turning up. They're all kind of yelling. And finally Margie cracks and she just yells, I didn't write the note. I didn't leave it in her room. I didn't help Ron remove the body from the house.
No. Oh.
It's weird, right?
Now, the only way that makes sense is if some detective prior to that, earlier, was saying, you
helped him move her.
You helped it. Yeah.
Right.
That's the only way. But
so when I first heard it with my ears, heard her saying it, I was like, whoa, same thing. Like, whoa, no, pause. Like, go back. Did she just say what I think she just said?
Mm-hmm.
And then Wendy, the cop, does the same thing, right? She says, whoa. So the body was in the house? So you're saying he moved the body from the house? You just didn't help him? And then she's flustered again. She's like, no, I'm saying I don't know anything about what happened. But we have to take a breath and go back and think. This is, at this point, it had been 33 years since Jennifer's disappearance. And for 33 years, Stephen has said, Mom, I know you wrote that note. Mom, I know you helped Dad. Mom, for 33 years. So she is freaking out and saying, like, and she's been offered immunity and she's still like, no, like, I didn't do, So normally speaking, a statement like that, I think, is a huge red flag. It's going to stand out. And in this scenario, I do feel like it's a little bit different. She could still be complicit in some things. I'm not saying she's not, but it doesn't necessarily mean for sure that she is. So here are some things to consider. All right. So Ron wound up in 2007, 2008. Ron gets in some trouble with the law. So he was an accountant, and evidently he went through he had some fraud charges because he opened up multiple bank accounts for NFL players and was siphoning money from them. Okay. So he gets charged with 3 counts of fraud or something like that. I mean, minimal time behind bars, but it was a felony offense. Mm-hmm. So he's in jail. Well, actually, now he's in jail for something different, but either way, we'll talk about that. And on August 19th, 2009, he was polygraphed. and he agreed to submit to a polygraph. So this is when, first of all, his stuff came back inconclusive, his results. So this is when, but what do we say at night shift? What do we say? Do you remember what we say?
Bless you.
No.
What do I say?
Deny the polygraph, Brian.
Oh yeah.
Deny the polygraph.
You always say.
I know. I think it hurts your lieutenant mouth to say those words out loud.
I never used the polygraph.
I know. Okay. So this is when Ron draws an aerial map. And so the way Stephen presents this during the entire documentary is that, Dad sat down, and Wendy will do it too. He drew this aerial map. They said, "Where is she?" And he said, "This is where she is." And so he drew what looked like their property borderline, what, geography was around their house, and that he put an X in the woods and told them if they could get a plane, he'd take them to her body. And as soon as they left to get more people to come in and talk to him and figure out what they were going to do with that information, he changed his mind and said that he knew nothing. So that seemed like, oh, that's huge, right? Like what are you talking about? And people do start to confess and take it back. That happens. But when Stephen confronts Ron with this many years later, Ron said, "No, actually, you're going to have to basically shut your mouth on that. They asked me to draw what it looked like around my house, where it looked like somebody could have taken her. And when they said, what's that on the other side of that lake or that pond?" And he said that's when they put an X over there. And they said, "That's the wood line." And he seemed like my lie detector didn't necessarily alarm on that one. When he said that to Stephen, that seemed like that could have been what happened. But we're getting some hearsay from some of the investigators early on that say things like, they didn't put out search posters or missing posters that, weren't cooperative and these kinds of things. So Ron's like, that's not how that went down. That's not what I said at all. So that one, we don't know. Okay. So this is interesting. We talked about Jennifer's diary earlier on. Okay. So Jennifer had an entry in her diary about her family, and this is what it said verbatim. Okay. She says, not many people know this, but there are great problems in my family. It just doesn't seem that way. The tension in my family is just so great. I don't let many people know how I feel deep inside, because I don't care what happens to my family. We were never a family. But my parents think they can make us a big, happy family, and I let them think that it's working, but it's not. It never will. So obviously, is this teenage angst, or is this based on, things that Stephen said? Now we kind of finally have Jennifer's words about what it was like at home a little bit. We know what Stephen has said about how his dad was, and Margie has never come back to say, "How dare you speak of Ron that way?" She corroborates all of this. So that's an interesting entry, at least from Jennifer. And later on, so Ron married a woman named Ruth Ann in 2007. And that's around the time I told you about that fraud charge in 2008. But soon after, like I said, minimal jail time there, not really a big deal. But soon after Ann, he gets back home with her, and Ann calls police to turn him in for owning a firearm as a felon. So she wants him away from her. He is sentenced to 3 years. And during that time, Ruth Ann had a protective order in place for him. So he was released on March 23rd, and then on March 25th, just 2 days later, he was arrested again for stalking her and wouldn't leave her residence. So this is an interesting thing, though. Ruth Ann says that when they first met up, so she kind of cries on the documentary, and she talks about the fact that no one has seemed to believe her or wanted to hear anything she has had to say about him over the years. She corroborates what Stephen says about his short fuse, but she was terrified of it prior to them obviously divorcing. So she said that when they were seeing each other, maybe upon their marriage, but Ron was like, "Do you want to see the ransom note?" He called it a ransom note. And he said, "Do you want to see the ransom note that we found in her bedroom that day?" And she was like, "Oh, like you have it?" Like I thought the cops would have it, which we all thought the cops would have it. And he said, "Yeah, I got it." And so he showed it to her. And what he showed her was a piece of paper with like giant, only like just a few words, and like giant, like block letter in marker whatever. Like, we have her. Like, what? I don't know, ransom note. Okay, she didn't know any different. So she was like, that's crazy. And that's wild that you have that. And I'm so sorry you've had to go through this and whatever. So it wasn't until all this time later that it came out that the legitimate note that was left on Jennifer's bed was circulated. And when she saw that, she about fainted because she was like, what? First of all, what was this that he showed me? Like, and why? Like, why would he show me a fake? Why would he like fabricate a fake ransom note? That's so bizarre. But she said when she saw the real one, she said, no, take it for what it's worth. This is all everything is highly circumstantial here, guys, this whole case. But she said as soon as she saw the real note, that she said, I gasped and I said, that's him. Like, he wrote that. And she said, that's how he talks. He goes back and forth between first and third person.
Okay. I wrote syntax.
Syntax, yeah. So I figured you might have.
Yeah.
So that's
okay.
Interesting. That's interesting to note, okay? So Stephen visited Ron in jail in 2010. They spoke for about 3 hours. I will say that Stephen is a bulldog. So whether he's right or wrong about his thoughts on what happened and how Jennifer's, demise was met, it's coming from a place of good intention for sure. But once he gets on it, he's not coming off. So if he's talking to his dad in jail for 3 hours, I can see, because I saw him talk with his mother, that he was probably like, Dad, I know you did it. Dad, just say you did it. Dad, dad, right? And he says that Ron said at that time, quote, suppose I pushed her and she just fell and hit her head. Is that what you want? You want me to take the fall for your mother?
Okay.
So we don't often want to hear an adult, a parent, hypothesize on whether or not and how they killed their kid, right? So that doesn't sound very appeasing. That doesn't make you feel like Ron didn't do it, But Ron is confronted with that currently and in the documentary, and he says, like, yeah, that's what I thought you wanted for me, just basically to shut up about it. Like, yeah, I'll just say that happened, and that way you and your mom can go off and be fine. Like, they're his dad is kind of he's dry, he's sarcastic, he wants to take control of the narrative. He's kind of a smart ass. Like, so actually, I could see him saying that and not being, even if he was not guilty of this. So all of these red flags and all of these bizarre behaviors and wording of things with mom and dad, it makes them look terrible in this, and they could still very well be guilty. Also, a lot of it can be explained away as well. So none of this is cut and dry. So this is the last thing I want to read to you, and we're going to wrap this up and we can discuss it if you want. But I've kind of given you more information on Margie and on Ron, which does make them sound potentially very guilty, okay? But let me go back to Tony, the boyfriend. According to the documentary, I'm just going to read this from a website. So it says, Tony began a full-fledged relationship with Corey, remember the one he's now married to, shortly following his and Jennifer's official breakup. Yet often he met Jennifer to continue their affinity or fool around. Remember, we talked a little bit about that. But things between them turned quite rough by the time September or October of 86. So just a couple of months, or about 4 months before she went missing, rolled around. And this would have been about 2 months or so after the abortion. And so more contention built. And so there was a note from Jennifer to Tony that says, quote, my arms have marks on them, not to mention bruises, Tony. She says, I hope you're happy. Stop throwing me around like a dumb ass whore. Call me back.
Okay.
So sadly, you have to remember that Jennifer lived in a home where it's never been talked about a lot whether or not her dad hurt her mom.
Okay.
We know he hit her brother with a golf club. He choked him, punched him. He hurt Jennifer. I think it would not be a far cry to think that he probably did the same thing to the mom. In fact, when you listen to the way she talks, she does sound like a whipped puppy. Like, she does sound like she can't be sure of her own thoughts, which would play into years of domestic violence, be it physical or even just, emotional. So Jennifer's with this guy, but she wants him so bad. I mean, she is enraged with jealousy that he is dating Corey. She cannot. Her friends will say, like, no, she would almost seek Corey out at school. Like, she was pissed. But she wanted him back so bad. But in the same vein, she's saying, like, quit throwing me around like a dumb whore. Like, you've left marks all over me. So even with that information, right, she's wanting him. So on the very evening prior to her disappearing, at 7:42 p.m., so on February 9th, so let's say, so on the 10th is the night she was on the phone with her girlfriend when she got an altercation with Dad, okay? But the night prior to that, meaning she had written this in her diary, or on this note, sorry, she dated and timed the note that she wrote. Okay. So it said 7:42 p.m., February 9th. She wrote, Tony, I'm just writing to tell you you should not have lied to me. I'm not yet sure what I'm going to do to hurt you back the way you hurt me by lying to me, but I can assure you it won't be pleasant. I think I'm going to do you a very, very big favor. And so Charlie May will say that she was threatening to basically like falsely accuse him of rape or something like this. Because she's enraged. I mean, I'm not saying cause like there's like a, like, you know, I'm not justifying her doing that, but I'm saying that seemed to be the thought, was that she was about to let loose some either true information or lies to really, really get back at Tony, and that he snapped or went to confront her. And she says, no, I'm going to tell my parents this, or I'm going to tell your, you know, whatever. Yeah. And that kind of the same idea with in thinking about if Ron had done it, maybe even it was accidental. Maybe they got an altercation and she did fall back and hit her head, or he hit her too hard, or whatever, or enraged and choked her. I mean, these things happen. He had already left bruises on her. But then again, remember there was that grand jury hearing, which you don't just secure those for Joe Schmo. I mean, you kind of have a reason to get people in a room for one of those. You know, we talked about the gated community. We talked about the note, like JonBenet, why is a stranger going to come in and write this note? Again, though, keep in mind, like we do this with JonBenet too. I think it's easy to do because you get this story in your head and like you're trying to make sense of the pieces of the puzzle. But we're basing all of this information off of the fact that it happened like Ron and Margie said it happened. Maybe it did. But maybe they didn't bust in a door to find a note laying there. Maybe the 3 days between when she, quote, went missing and they called the cops were the 3 days where they decided this is what we're going to do. I'm going to write this note. Maybe he didn't tell her. He wasn't a dummy. He had been in Vietnam. He was then an accountant. But he knew tactics. He knew mind play. He knew. So like maybe he knew how to handle this stuff and basically tell her to you're going to go on in there somewhere. I'm not talking to you about this. You don't need to know what happened and you're not going to. But then again, we have Tony and we have a motive for Tony because we have Jennifer's own words of like basically a threat of like, oh, I'm going to hurt you worse than you hurt me. And it didn't seem to be a physical threat, right? It sounded like she was going to let loose some information that would be very, very damning to Tony. And then you've got Charlie May, who could just be a Looney Tune making up a story. But at the same time, you've got Tony's behavior on the documentary where he's really kind of acting as though he didn't know Jennifer that well or Tony that well. And we know the opposite is true. So they went to grand jury, but nothing has come out from that. Not yet. That was later on in, I think, 23. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, usually, I mean, I don't want to misspeak here. Usually, though, in grand jury, you have, like, a detective will present to the grand jury the case, what they have. Right. They may have, like, witnesses go in and present their statement, their information. It sounds like that would have been Charlie May. I'm not sure that there would have been more than that. Like, usually the suspect is not aware of at the time. That's true, because then they would potentially be charged. So the lead on the case now, when he's talking in the documentary and they say like, do you still find the family complicit in this? Do you, whatever? And he's just like, as he should, but he's like, I'm not going to answer that question. The only thing he will say is that basically sometimes things aren't how they seem or what, kind of along those lines, very vaguely speaking. And I think that that's part of it when you watch that, because you are conditioned to believe for sure, without a doubt, that dad did it and mom wrote the note, because that is Steven's standing, like, to the point that he didn't even look like he knew how to sit down or stand up or form a thought once he got some of this extra information about Tony. Because then he was like, oh, damn, like now he's got to reconcile the fact that if he's wrong, he has spent a very long time alienating his parents and thinking, which I think no love lost with his dad one way or another for him. But certainly he said that he'd have to look into how to rectify a relationship with his mother. Now, I can't say they're fully off the hook. I just think they didn't have this other information. They did do a more recent analysis of DNA. And while that note has been mishandled so many times, it still couldn't exclude Tony. Which is something I don't know. Are you leaning more toward I know you don't know this is the segment of the show where Brian gets diplomatic. I know you don't know the answer and you didn't investigate this case, but based on the facts that or the stuff that are you thinking more of a dad or a Tony here?
Well, I would lean right now on the dad because he's got access to the crime scene. He's got the ability to move a body. He and the mom, I'm saying.
Or he alone.
Or he alone. Yeah, I'm saying like between those two and then Tony, I would lean on the dad and the mom. Also, they're the ones who were not calling the police immediately. They were not the ones who were, you know what I mean? Like everything they were doing was indicative of, we've done something that we
and their, like I said again, their rationale for that, or the way they excuse that, is that, hey, look, Jennifer's run away before. We saw that, and we were like, fine, go. Like, see you when we see you. Granted, they did a lot of bizarre things.
Yeah, and that's, again, I think a lot of that can be explained. And I've taken reports and dealt with parents where they're like, my kid is a terror. They run away. They cause problems. Like, don't bring them back. Like, don't find them. I'm just filing a report because I got to file a report, kind of thing. So I don't know. I just, I look at that. Tony would be a person as well of interest just because of the motive, all that stuff that was going on between the two of them. But then you do have to look at access to the crime scene, that sort of thing. The note is just so weird to me.
So weird. Okay, well, let's talk about that for just a minute, though. Let's see here. I was looking at some of our comments. Again, guys, for anybody new here, just a reminder that it's hang on, but they reported that she is only... that she had run away before. This is a live YouTube show at first before we drop it to audio streaming. So you'll hear us engage with the chats a little bit. Again, you're always welcome to come to the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel, and it's free and you can hop in and chat with us. So, excuse me. The note. So again, and we won't get all in the weeds with it right this second, but your daughter's with me. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Pandos, your daughter is with me. She's fine. She's having some problems. Let's see here. So put your brain around whether or not a Tony and or a Charlie would be writing this, or whether or not it would come from a Ron, a dad situation, or mom even. Your daughter is with me. She is fine. She is having some problems, though. She needs some time away from this place. 3 to 5 days max. So weird. She is like a daughter to me, and I'm like a dad to her. Here are some of Jennifer's quotes. Quote, I'm fine. I just need time to think. So here's where I'm having a hard time. If dad does this, and so the idea is that you're going to separate yourself from, you're not going to, make it look like it's anybody like you doing this.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be weird that he'd say I'm like a father figure to her.
Right.
If father is who's doing this. Also, it's written in a way, I don't mean handwriting, but it's juvenile in the sense of if dad wanted to stage it to look like Tony or to look like, one of her teenage, like, then he wouldn't say the part about the father figure either. I'm like a father to her. Yeah. She is like a daughter to me. But then it is written juvenile, like that whole 3 to 5 days max. And then here are some of Jennifer's quotes. To me, that reads like when I was like, Easter Bunny, I've left a blank space here on my paper for you to sign. Like, here are some of Jennifer's quotes. Like, that's so bizarre.
It is. That's the phrasing of that was weird to me. If you showed me this and nothing else, I knew nothing about the case. I just looked at this. My first in 1987, granted, because now handwriting has gotten pretty horrible in society now, in general, sloppy. But in 1987, if I'm looking at this, I would think immediately that this is a kid.
Oh, it looks like
someone, it. Or someone.
Ooh, what if Charlie May wrote it with his not arm?
What?
Charlie May only has one arm, but I don't know if he has a prosthetic. What if he wrote it with his prosthetic? What if he had one?
He may have.
I don't know.
It is sloppy handwriting.
Here's the deal.
But not like it's written in a hurry.
No.
It's written like someone who doesn't read and write a lot.
So there are a lot of thoughts on that. People think that either it was written to look, like a distorted, like that it was written on purpose to look very different than whoever wrote it, like than their handwriting. Which, if a child didn't write that, then I'd almost be certain that somebody's doing something weird like that.
Yeah,
but
the comma is right. If you pull it back up, that comma is used properly.
Hang
on. Was it like third sentence down, fourth?
Hang on. She's having some problems though. She needs some time away from this place. Maybe a comma, maybe a period, 3 to 5 days max. She is like a daughter to me,
like a comma, and
I'm like a dad to her. Yeah, but they didn't use an apostrophe and I'm just saying it for. So I think
maybe they got lucky with the comma.
Yeah, but the more if we go down the Tony route, with the way Charlie explained that stupid mess about the barrel and the acid. I'm trying to get my mind away from that because I don't think it's true, or at least I don't think Tony could have done that alone, but Tony could have done it with Charlie maybe, which would also explain why he acted like he barely knew Charlie in the documentary. But I could see Charlie writing that, like if Tony, let's say whatever. She gets off the phone with what's her name. Let's say it doesn't go the way it sounds. Like that she and dad didn't get in a fight after the phone call. And he just goes back to his room and slams the door and he's pissed. And she's pissed. And she's like, I can't stand my parents. She's like, you know what? I can't stand Tony either. Like, I'm so angry with him. And we know that she was from that diary entry the night prior. Let's say they get on the phone. What if she calls Tony and he comes over? Like, no, you know what? I'm coming over. We'll handle this. Because who knows? I mean, Mom will talk about the fact that I had no idea they had a physical relationship. And she's like, but they got home from school and 2 hours later I'd get home from work. Like, wow, it's crazy. Like, so, but my point is, I think he was no stranger to coming in and out of that sliding door in her room. And so, he comes over and maybe it was just originally going to be a conversation or whatever, or maybe they were all going to hang out with Charlie. I don't know. But I guess my point is I could see Charlie writing that because that would sound interesting. Like, that could make sense for the verbiage of, and Charlie was a little bit older than Tony too. So even just that, like, I'm like a dad to her. Now it doesn't sound like teenagers. Oh, here are some quotes from Jennifer. Like, I don't see Tony writing that. And I don't see Ron even writing that. That's so bizarre.
Wow. But okay.
where it says she needs some time away from this place. Mm-hmm. That sounds like like someone who's close, but just enough of an outsider, like Charlie. Or maybe, Tony could have known she had an appointment coming up and was like, shit, we don't need them calling around and snooping around why she didn't come to her appointment, so cancel it. Tell them to cancel the appointment. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say when I so rudely interrupted you?
Oh, well, using that about here are some quotes. That's weird. Like, why would you not just say, Jennifer says, I mean...
Oh, because clearly these aren't, and we know this, these are not quotes from Jennifer. So I think that we can assume that something has happened to Jennifer by the time this note is written.
Yeah.
Let me speak her back into existence. Yeah. Here are some quotes from Jennifer, but it's still such a weird way to write it.
Because you would think Jennifer would just write a note.
Or you would think that they would say, hey, she says that she's fine. We're going to head out for a while. Don't worry about who I am. I'm a friend of hers. If it's the stranger writing the note, right? Like, but they wouldn't say, here are some quotes. Like,
yeah. Yeah. It's just weird. And that's when, honestly, when you're sitting there like 3 a.m, looking at it and putting everything together, and because like the son only knew what he knew. He didn't know about everything that's in the case jacket, and that's how. I mean, you have to know everything. That the whole fact that the note is even left, to me, would scream obviously that she didn't run away or willingly leave. Mm-hmm. I would just imagine that she would just leave like she did last time.
Oh, I think she would want them to know she left.
Yeah. Hey, y'all pissed me off.
Yeah, or not write a note at all and bounce. Right, that's what she did the first time. And if she's leaving, she's taking her contact. She's taking her coat. If she's knowing that she's leaving, I kind of early on, I'm taking runaway off the table here. Right. None of that makes sense.
Sorry, let me back up. I guess I didn't say what I was thinking was if Tony got there and that, like, however that worked out, if she made contact with him or whatever, and then he came over, in other words, her willingly leaving with someone and then something bad happening at another location. Mm-hmm. I don't think that happened because of the note, like we're saying.
And I mean, take it for what it's worth. Again, not ideal science, especially that many years removed, but the dogs did hit on the storage area underneath the house and the living room. Of course, that's going to look more like Dad, right? Because Tony's not going to put her in the storage unit under her own home while he can wait to dispose of her. I mean, I think this is a case, though, that Dad seems most likely, like you said, because he lives there. He could control the situation, control the scene. He's given himself the 3 days to handle it. It says it in the note. But it's like so many others that we've covered. There's so many other individuals like that are just kind of, around there, like in the periphery, that it's like, oh, it can make it just, it could be anyone. I mean, I think that if you were to come to me with information tomorrow and lay out a case and present evidence that shows that it was Tony and maybe with the assistance of Charlie, I'd believe it. Mm-hmm. If you said it was Dad and Mom did or didn't know about it, I'd believe it.
And that's the tough part. Like, you would look at this like an unsolved case. So it's like you open up an unsolved case and you start going through it, and a lot of times it is that. It's like you've got 2 or 3 potential suspects.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of at a standstill where you can't really.
So Maureen said, if there's no evidence of a struggle, what if she went out to meet someone and then she died and the note was to cover up? Well, then that would mean that she died, and now under the duress of just having accidentally or otherwise killed someone, that person has to go to her house if they weren't even there initially. Now they've got to go there. So assuming they even know exactly where she lives and how to get in that bedroom and then leave the note. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if someone didn't even know she was taking off, if her parents didn't know she was taking off with someone or sneaking out, then they wouldn't have to insert themselves back into the home, unless you mean something different. If I've got that wrong, let me know, Marines, but that's kind of how I'm reading it. It's not often, though. It's often that we cover unsolved or unresolved that have multiple suspects, and multiple suspects, they could all be bad guys, but it's not often that I come away saying, ooh, it really could kind of go either way for me.
Yeah,
Only because with that, to know, I guess the grand jury stuff's weird unless they're bringing them in just to get more information.
Yeah, I don't, and I could be wrong. Like, I mean, every state works a little differently.
You're right, though. I don't know why they would bring Tony in if he's the lead suspect.
Yeah.
But why would they bring both of them in to meet in front of the grand jury if let's say if it's the dad?
Yeah, well, because it could be that
they have information.
If I'm a lead detective and I go in and I start presenting a case, and let's say all my evidence points towards the dad, however, this information came out during the investigation about Tony and Charlie. However, I'm going to let you hear from Tony and Charlie. We've been able to exclude them based on whatever, and then they give their testimony.
Okay.
Potentially, I don't know. Because usually that's what grand jury was. You would go in, you would present a case, and then you've got citizens that go, okay, and then you get your charge.
That's a good point.
So I don't know. I think
and then like I said, though, we know that, and this could be completely beside the point, that she had written that kind of threatening letter to Tony about like, oh, basically I'm about to expose you, or I'm about to make it real bad for you within 48 hours of her disappearance. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't help anything for sure, especially when we know that he had rage enough to cause bruises all over her. I mean,
yeah, because you got the history then. So,
oh gosh. Okay, well, I'm hungry and I need a shower.
I'm hungry and I already showered.
So there's all of that. Tyler's saying that in speaking of the cadaver dogs, about he's talking about Jack and Lily out of Nova Scotia, the children that are missing. Gosh, what was that, Tyler? Was it May? I believe it was May, June, July, August, September. I think it was May that they went missing. And he said that they are just now releasing cadaver dogs in that case. It had been more of like a search and rescue, and it certainly looks more like a recovery, which I think it's looked more like a recovery for quite some time now. So I don't know. That's terrible. But so moving forward, you can follow Brian at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram. He has a YouTube channel as well. You can find him at his website that is called
The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
The Disruptors. Gosh, you would think it was just rocket science, really.
Yeah.
The Disruptors with Brian Sanders. And there you can also find, obviously, like the classes that he offers that can be to sworn law enforcement or to civilians, peons like you and I. And so Liam said, what's his website? Tell him again.
The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
Okay. That's the one.
Really creative.
And so you can find all his stuff there. Again, he does provide out of training, or if you will, classes and things like that, and some of his knowledge over there to the police post.
It's on Instagram as police posts, plural, and then there's the app for law enforcement they can download. It's free. There's a bunch of different courses on there and monthly lives.
Perfect. So he's going to be on one of those next week. And then, of course, you can always so go listen to his show. If you haven't, it's very opposite of this one. So it's more of a variety show of sorts. We call him Sonny Bono in our spare time for this reason. Sometimes, yeah, we do. We do that all the time. That's what we always do. And so, but anyway, so he has all kinds of guests. So it can be FBI agents, DA agents. It can be members of a band, people who have reformed their lives. So anybody with really a cool story to tell or really need information, he has them. Check that out at the Disruptors with Brian Sanders. I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get it all right. Anyway, follow us on for Night Shift on Andrea Up Late on Instagram, on the YouTube channel. It's all got the same name. You can always email case recommendations to andreauplate@yahoo.com. I try to make it easy across the board there, or you can send me a message on Instagram. We're about to follow up with a recommended case from one of our buddies, one of our listeners, Bosco. And it's almost time for Halloween. So if someone's asking about it already in the chats. I'm going to try to cut off before the 2-hour mark.
Yes.
So we love y'all. Tell the people good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.